Welcome to everyone who's joining us. Thank you for being with us. We're going to let everybody join us. Lots of people hopping in here. Give everybody a minute to connect. I see some connections still coming on board. All right. Well, thank you for joining Enactus US for the Partner Summit Series. Today, we're going to talk about DEI in action, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is a repeat or an encore presentation of a session we did very much like this in May of 2021. Lots has happened since then, and we have several of the same panelists joining us. So we're looking forward to hearing what's changed and what's coming in the next, in the future. And I am Betsy Liley, just trying to move those slides, Chief Development Officer of Enactus. Very grateful to have you all with us. I want to introduce Zvia Schonenberg, who started just a week ago as our new Enactus US president. Zvia is with us, and I'd love to have her say a word, but she brings an incredibly rich background and extraordinary experience in ed tech, very innovative education initiatives, charter schools, and entrepreneurship. Zvia, will you say hello?
We'll say hello. So hi, everyone. I look forward to meeting all of you individually, the folks I haven't met yet. Yeah, this is literally my week anniversary, started last Wednesday. And just to give you a quick overview of my background, I started in education as a lawyer, and I was on the legal team representing the first charter school to open in New York State. And that was back in 2000. I did a bunch of years, 10 to 12 years, depending on how you count, as a lawyer, worked for the Department of Education, for charter schools and networks. And then I moved over to the business side in the startup world, thinking, well, I had worked on startup schools, so maybe I can transition that to work on early stage ed tech companies. So I did that for a number of years and got into the whole innovation in education kind of network. Worked at NIFTY, the Network for Teaching Entrepreneurship, ran programs there. And now I'm here. And most recently, I was the CEO of a test prep company, made an acquisition, reorg, did a whole bunch of things during the pandemic. So it was also like a startup. And here at Enactus, I'm looking forward to learning, being a sponge, figuring out what programs work and how we can make things better and how we can better serve our community and our partners. So hopefully I will meet each of you who are here because you guys are engaged. So I want to meet you all and listen. So looking forward to that, and thank you.
Great to have you here. All right. One more announcement before we move on to our program, and that's just a reminder that the Enactus World Cup, kind of the culmination of a whole year of engagement and effort across Enactus, happens later this month, starting October 30th. We're in Puerto Rico. You can still register and join us. Easy to get to Puerto Rico. Day one is project excursions. This is the first time this has happened at a World Cup where you can travel to meet, to see projects from Enactus Puerto Rico. On the 31st, the opening round happens. We have a welcome ceremony, the country celebration, and a 77-second film festival. And the next day, lots of competition from our global races, climate, sustainable food, oceans, and plastics, as well as our first ever Enactus Ventures pitch demo. And then on November 2nd, we have the semifinal and final round. You can participate virtually and you can participate in person. You can judge both from your living room or your office, or you can be in Puerto Rico. So please consider registering. Just go to enactus.org/World Cup. We'd love to have you participate. All right. I'd like to introduce Neera Johri to say a word from Riches, one of our longest and most beloved partner organizations. Neera?
Thank you, Betsy. That's so kind. I'm Neera Johri. I'm the Vice President for Global Inclusion and Sustainability at Rich Products. For those of you who don't know Rich's, we're a bakery, frozen food company. We make all of those delicious and indulgent treats in your bakery aisle or your pizzas or some of the snacks that you might be enjoying. And for us, DEI is really integral to our business strategy and our talent strategy. And we really rely on the support and the partnership of folks like Enactus. We're excited to be able to sponsor this series for you all to learn more about what others are doing. And a huge part of this, I think, is also none of us are alone in this work. Many of our challenges are the same, depending on, our organizations might have different titles, but we often are encountering the same challenges. So great to just exchange and learn from each other. And we're excited to enable that today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All right. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our panel and our moderator today. And she was our moderator in May of 2021 is Kim Shaw from Coca-Cola, who brings incredible experience in this work. When she joined us 18 months ago, she was relatively new at Coca-Cola and now has a few more months under her belt, but brings a wealth of experience in this work. Great to have her. We have Kelvin Buncombe from Walmart, who had such interesting insights 18 months ago and leads an enormous business unit for Walmart. We're grateful to have Kelvin with us. And Rob Burns, who joins us from Sam's Club, who is new to our panel. He was not part of our panel in May of 2021, but also has such broad experience and thoughts about this topic. So we're excited to have them get started. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand off to Kim. I should say one other thing. We had advertised that Dr. Dale Caldwell would be with us today. And unfortunately, he had a personal issue that came up and sends his regrets and best wishes for this conversation. But Kim, without further ado, I will hand off to you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Betsy. And thank you. It's an honor to be back. And as Betsy said, I think I was all but like 3 or 4 months into, Coca-Cola and then being asked to come in front of this group. And I feel much more comfortable this year, right? So hopefully that will be reflected as well. But it's an honor to be back with you again for this year's Partner Summit series. I think my hope, right, that we all walk away from this session with nuggets of information, right, ideas that you can implement, whether it be in your work, in your communities, and perhaps no pressure to Kelvin and Rob, but if we really knock it out of the park, maybe leave inspired, right, as well. So with that being said, and with the bar, set a little bit high, let's go ahead and get started. And Kelvin, I'm going to kick it over to you first. So okay. Last year, I started this session by what a year it's been for so many reasons. I feel like we can rinse and repeat that statement for this year, the years to come as well. A lot happening, right? Globally, domestically, locally in our communities. But if you think about it, what has been that standout moment for you from a DE&I perspective and any over the past 12 months?
Well, first of all, thanks, Kim. It's really good to be back with you, and it's good to see my buddy Jerry Cleves. Good to see you on the screen, Jerry. And so thanks for having me back. I thought a little bit about this. And, the first thought, without really overthinking it, Kim, was the elevation of Ketanji Brown Jackson to the Supreme Court, an African-American female first, right, to be elevated to that position. That's a big statement for DEI, and it's one for others to follow. I think the perspective that she's going to bring to the court is going to be impactful. So without even thinking about it, that one came to mind. And then the other was, I've been following the Business Roundtable, and I must admit that when they first came out, I think it was last year or 2 years ago, Kim, and leaned into this DE&I space in a big way, I was a bit skeptical. about whether or not it would be sustained. But, I think their sustained efforts say something about where corporate America is in this space, because they've been advancing a lot of thoughts around reforming hiring and the advancement practices in corporate America to emphasize skills as an example, and not just degrees. And we know that that's going to be a big issue as we try to advance our entry-level folks who are mostly diverse into the bigger jobs. So, through apprenticeships and training and even second chance hiring. So the fact that they're continuing to do that work so gives me hope that this is something that's going to be around for a bit, and it's not going to be a flash in the pan. So those are two things that came to mind just very quickly, and I didn't want to overthink it, but those two things sort of popped in my mind.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, because I did when I was thinking about it, and like I feel like we're moving away from some of the performative type of things, right? Not in all cases, but certainly I think we now have some substance, right, and some kind of proof points. And I think you highlighted a few of them for sure. How about Rob? Same question for you. Any standout moments or surprises over the last 12 months?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Great answer, Kelvin. I love that. And what I would share is, as I think about the student loan forgiveness and trying to close the gap, right? Obviously, for me, I was able to attend school for free. I graduated from West Point, so I've never really experienced the student loan malaise that some of the graduates have experienced over the decades. But to look at the gap as we think about wealth and wealth generation and the impact that student loans have on the lack of being able to accomplish your goals financially, that has stood out to me as I've learned more about it, Kelvin. It's been very interesting, and I'm so proud of our company and some of the work that we've done with Live Better U and giving our associates opportunities to get their education and pay $1 a day for that. That's been very big for me. But obviously, for us at Walmart, we live every day with many surprises. And for us, Kelvin, ensuring that we give our associates opportunities to live their best lives, that's been a big one for me. And, I look forward to us continuing to invest in our associates so that they can advance, and obviously we can retain that talent. But that's what I would share. It was very fascinating to me to really dive into those numbers when we started learning more about the student loan forgiveness program.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you for that. And yeah, that's the impact of like a short term and a very long term, right? Like you said, in terms of closing the gap, the wealth creation. So I'll stay with you, Rob, for the next one. What do you think the biggest long-term challenge is in this space?
Yeah, I think for us, it's just ensuring that when we think about our 2.3 million associates that we have, that they continue to take advantage of that program. But overall, when you think about diversity and equity, I think it's, Kelvin, you would agree, Kelvin and I have known each other for decades. It's becoming harder, right? As we think about our country being so splintered, bifurcated, and polarized. And I think for us, it's going to take some intentional activities to ensure that we continue the advancements. But in our world, as we continue those advancements, we have to be definitely okay with the incremental progress, right? I think sometimes we want to see transformation and we want to get there tomorrow, but obviously it's going to take time to really get us to where we need to be when it comes to diversity and inclusion. And I'm really proud of the advancements we've made here at Walmart and Sam's Club. And you could start to see, as Kelvin mentioned earlier, some of the advancements we've seen in government as well as around our country, but we have a lot of work to do, right? And I often tell my team that we have to be great in this space. because our competition, the other side, is definitely focused on ensuring that we continue to be polarized and we continue the divisiveness. So I think that's the long term, right? The long term challenge, we've got to be great in this space of driving more inclusion and diversity. And one thing I will say, Kelvin, that I'm really ecstatic about at Walmart, we encourage everyone to bring their full self to work. Now, that also can make the challenge even more daunting, if you will, because as we're inviting everyone to be themselves, we have to be better as leaders as we drive inclusion.
Yes, Rob, I'm with you. And I want to build on some of what Rob said, Kim. So thinking about the long term and how we just make this conversation just fully integrated into everyday work, I think the biggest challenge is really getting to critical mass so that we can sustain this effort. And so what I mean by that is we get to the point where there is sufficient representation at all levels so that when we're at the table discussing whether it's hiring or marketing or strategy or operational initiatives, that we have diverse input so that the output is just naturally, right, diverse and inclusive. And so it hits all the tenets of DEI. And that takes intentionality at all levels. And that's the thing, quite honestly, that I have struggled with the most. And even at Pepsi, when we would have conversations about DE&I, and I was on the board of the Inclusion Council, I kept pushing this notion that we've got to have the right representation so that we don't think of DE&I as some separate initiative, but it's woven into everything we do every day. Yeah. That's the only way that this is going to be sustainable and meaningful. But I believe that, you know, Walmart's an example and some others that I think we're starting to get it. And I see progress in terms of the intentionality around inclusion and diverse representation at all levels of the organization. So that's kind of where my head's at.
You both are speaking my language, right? I mean, so much of what you said resonated with me, you know, and for us at Coca-Cola, we often talk about progress over perfection, right? If we wait until everything is perfect, right, we're going to be waiting a while. But I think that whole sustainable progress over time is, you know, when I talk about this is a change movement, right? Not a moment, but that movement kind of mentality. And in order to have that, you need to have that sustainable focus. So, you know, some of the other things that you were talking about, like the weaving, right? Oftentimes I'll talk to, not just within our own organization, others, where it's like, well, we want to have a DE&I discussion, and then we want to have a talent discussion. They are one and the same, right? And the more we start embedding, the more we start doing that weaving, the more, you know, to me, it's about building that muscle, that kind of know-how for organizations. And Rob, you mentioned in terms of leadership, right? Leadership capability in order to make everyone feel comfortable having those conversations.
Kim, we're with you. Let's just build on that for a second, and we can be mindful of time. You know, the other thing though too is whether it's Coke or Pepsi or Walmart, whomever, we start initiatives, we pilot things, we test and learn in this space, and then we find that it's difficult to scale beyond that initial, right? So that's the other piece of this. As we solve this problem, we've got to then think about the scalability of it. And what we're finding is that for this really to take root, we've got to do some coalition building outside of the building, right? Correct. And it's also going to include public policy advocacy. So that there are other dimensions of this that we've got to start to embrace to make it scalable.
Absolutely, I couldn't. And you know what? It's interesting. I'm a big believer of the coalition model, and I think there's even some really good examples outside of the U.S. Brazil being one of those where we could kind of, you know, look at best practices and kind of bring in. But I agree with you. It's that, what is the saying, that rising tide lifts all ships, right? That's the mentality, right? That I think we all need to strive for sure. So obviously the session, the topic today, it's a big one, and yes, being mindful of time, and we could probably like have a half day or a full day session on some of these, and it's, you know, it's a layered and complex emotive topic, and you know, we're all on different parts of the journey, whether it be us personally or as organizations. But you know, Rob and Kelvin, I mean, obviously the organizations that you're part of, what has changed from a brand, a marketing, a business perspective? You know, whether you look at it over the last year or 2 years, what's the evolution that you guys have seen?
So I'll kick it off, Rob, if you want me to. I think that we're shifting from DE&I as the right thing to do to it being a true business imperative. I'm really, I don't know how you see it, Kim, at Coke, but I'm really starting to see that shift. That and here's where it's sort of evidenced is in our business, Rob. I think the same is true at Sam's Club, that the vast majority of our customers are women. And so I think, and I don't think I know. In merchandising, I just saw this slide that went up in one of our global leadership meetings a couple of weeks ago. There were some big promotions to executive vice president in the merchandising organization. And Kim, more than 50% of them were females. So when the dust settled, the direct reports to the chief merchant officer for Walmart, I'd say 60% of those individuals were females. 10 years ago, all of them would have been men. And so that didn't just happen by chance. Someone was very thoughtful about the fact that we have to be able to relate to these CEO women who are CEO moms, we call them, right? Who are coming into our stores every day. And why not get women in these decision-making roles to help us better understand how to relate to these shoppers, these customers, and women of all diverse backgrounds, so that we've got a really rich, you know, sort of discussion and decision making. I was surprised and really pleased to see it, and that's why I say I really believe that it's no longer considered. Well, I guess on a journey, I wouldn't say that we're already there. To your point, Kim, we're making progress toward it, and this was evidence of that happening. And I don't think it's isolated to just us, or even just that organization, because in other functional areas, supply chain, operations, I'm seeing the same thing.
Yeah, beautiful. And I mean, that's a beautiful example of being very intentional, right? Looking at the data, using data to drive decisions, and then being very intentional about the decisions that you're making. Rob, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, and Kelvin, that was a great point, and I noticed that also. And I think, you know, overall for Sam's as well as Walmart, you know, our strategy continues to be the same of trying to save customers and members money. But I think two things that we've really elevated on is, first of all, we're very focused on being customer and member obsessed, but also more so with our associates, right? And then investing in our associates so that they can live better lives. And I think over time, we've done a much better job of that, Kelvin. And I think from an investment perspective, our company is not just focused on diversity and inclusion internally, but externally. How do we solve more of the problems that we see in society? And we've put our money behind investing into problem areas across the country. And Kelvin, we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars to ensure that we're helping alleviate some of the things that have been issues over decades. And so for me, Kelvin, I think we've started to put our money into society, and we'll continue to do that in the future. And I'm excited about where we're going, Kelvin, because diversity and inclusion, it used to be like a or in the past. Like we would do like what you said, Kim, the talent discussion. Oh, well, hey, let's talk diversity now, right? Whereas now it's embedded in everything that we do, right? And it's become a much more of a daily discussion here the last few years versus a quarterly. And I think that obviously that is great when it's permeating all of our meetings as we move our businesses forward at Coke, Pepsi, or Rich's. We'll continue to make sure that we talk about these subjects daily and not quarterly.
Yeah, and Kim, you're in an organization that's really good at marketing, and just look at some of the marketing material that we see, the commercials, and otherwise mixed race couples everywhere, right? And I thought that initially, I said when I first started seeing it, I thought, oh, that's cute. Well, now guess what? You see it all the time, and gay couples being intimate on it, and everything. It's just those things I think are here to stay, and they aren't going to change. I don't believe.
Yeah, agreed. And we're looking, obviously, being marketing organization, being very data driven. It's also, looking at the different generations as well, and kind of the expectations, and kind of balancing the needs, right, across the various generations and demographics. It's fascinating for sure. So many companies have been champions, right, of diversity, have been very vocal and kind of, out there in terms of their assertions, and others have remained silent. What's your best advice on how to navigate, the charged DEI environment for companies who operate in communities who have that variety of viewpoints on any given issue? Calvin, this is a good one.
It really is a good one. And I just, I'm shaking my head, Jerry, because we've had some really deep conversations at Walmart with Doug, our CEO, and others on this very topic, right? Our company is a microcosm of the greater society, right? So we have the same sort of discussions and challenges. And I remember saying this, and I'll be delicate, but I want to be honest. And I said, and I remember saying this actually to one of the leaders. I said, "This is my belief." I said, "It's anecdotal. I don't have data." I said, "But until white men stop feeling that advances by people of color are a zero-sum game, we're gonna struggle with this." And then there was silence, Jerry, silence in the room after that statement. But then we all sat back and thought about it. And this comes from the water cooler conversations, right? You walk up on conversations, and I think people feel that way, that if there's a gain by a person of color, then a white male lost an opportunity. When the reality is there is opportunity for all. And the other piece of this, and I followed up by saying, hey, listen, we all appreciate the fact that we compete in a global economy, and no gender, no ethnic group, right, has cornered the market on intellect and genius. And so if we're going to be competitive, we have to develop all minds. And so anyway, that started a pretty rich debate. And that's really, if I can be honest with this group, that's really where I am. We've got to move beyond the zero-sum game thinking around advancement by people of color and females. So for me, I think you got to confront it, and we just got to talk openly about these sensitive issues. And as we converse about it more, people become more comfortable, and we get beyond it. And then the final thing, and I'll stop, is this: the other thing that I appreciate as well is when Walmart says, "Hey, listen, one of our core values is respect for the individual." What we're saying to everybody who works with the company is, when you put on that badge, you accept the fact that that's a core value and you're going to embrace it. And when you step over the threshold, You're going to behave in a way that's consistent with our core value. And if you can't do that, you have to take off the badge. I think when we have that kind of conversation directly, people are forced to stop and think about what they really believe. So anyway, I don't want to, I'll get off.
No, it's wonderful. Rob, I'll let you jump in here.
Hey, Kelvin. I think that's just getting down the brass tacks there. And you're definitely right. And Kelvin, here's what I would caveat to your statement is, the zero sum analysis there is, can we not afford to have Kelvin in the room? Like when I think about Kelvin, what you bring to that meeting, like that statement probably would not have been made if you were not at that table, right? And I think about when we think about diversity and cross-pollination, like we cannot afford, Kelvin, if you will, to not have diversity, right? Because that subject would not have been discussed if you weren't at the table. And I think for us, Kelvin, as you talk about respect for the individual, it is interesting because we want everyone to feel like they belong, and we espouse that tenet, and we live by that, and it makes it, as I stated earlier, more difficult. But I think for us to continue to make advancements, I think all of us should espouse the theory that we want the best talent at the table, no matter who they are. And obviously, Kelvin, we have a long way to go, and we're making strides here at our company with your aforementioned statement with the females that are leading big businesses now at our company. But we have to continue to move the needle when it comes to diversity. And you're right, Kelvin, we're going to have to accept that when we promote diverse talent, it's making us better, right? And I really believe that, and I've experienced that in my career.
Yeah. And Kim, the only thing I want to clean up is, and I'm not saying all white men, right? The point I was making was, right, so those who struggle with it, but I think there's sufficient numbers of them that we should be open to talking about it.
Absolutely. And yeah, engaging in the conversation for sure. And for us, I mean, we have the same thing, have the conversation often, right? And for us, we always go back to our purpose, right? We're a purpose-driven organization. Yes, we have products to sell and things of that nature. But, if you think about our purpose, it's refresh the world and make a difference. I mean, if this work doesn't ladder up to the making a difference piece of it, then we are totally missing our calling, right? And we need to come up with a new purpose statement, quite frankly, right? But I think it's the proactive, continual engagement with leadership in the discussion. And the other thing I'll say is I think a lot of organizations, because of the things that have happened in the US, around the world, we become very reactive. And sometimes when we're reactive, the companies aren't always showing up with their best foot forward. So, my recommendation is always have the proactive conversations. Where do you stand as an organization, right, in certain areas, so that you're not caught like, oh my goodness, what do we say? And then you say something wrong or something, oh, we didn't quite intend that. Or from an employee perspective, Rob, in terms of the engagement piece, you take too long, right? Well, why didn't you act faster? So being very proactive and having those conversations early that, again, align to, the purpose of the organization, I have seen pay off in spades, right? Whenever there is a difficult conversation, a difficult incident that you have to navigate as a company.
Yeah, and Kim, what I would say is it seems as though they're getting more and more difficult, right? It's been fascinating to me, Kelvin, over the last few years. Like we think that we have conquered a difficult task, and the next one seems to be even more difficult. And so I think for me, Kelvin, I always think about we're always practicing, right? And we've experienced that with COVID, with some of the unrest, and some of the decisions with the Supreme Court. And I think for all of us with diversity and inclusion, I think obviously, Kim, you said this earlier, we can get better, but we're always practicing, and we got to continue to pursue perfection, but understanding that we're not going to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've taken it's an iterative approach, right? It's like you said, we're constantly learning. I want to be mindful of time, and I want to make sure that we, if there are any questions from anyone out there, would love to address them now. Otherwise, we have some other questions we can engage on, but would love to hear from anyone out there. You can put them in the chat, or if you feel comfortable coming off of mute, I think, Betsy, we might be able to do that as well.
Absolutely. We'd love to have anybody who has a question share it. And you're welcome to do that in chat, or as Kim said, to just join us in conversation. I noticed a comment in the chat about Enactus's own diversity, and I wanted to just note that Enactus US has 50 plus diverse serving institutions as partners where Enactus programs take place. So that includes 19 historically Black colleges and universities and 31 Hispanic serving institutions. The demographics for Enactus US students are actually quite diverse. More than half of the US students identify as non-white. And that's a higher percentage than the US college going population. And the Enactus US students also have about the same percent of Pell Grant eligibility, which is a indicator of socioeconomics, as well as first to attend college. It's around 39%. Across the Enactus global community, those statistics are pretty true. And in both global and US, more women than men participate in Enactus programs. So Zia, and then I see Jerry has his hand up as well.
Thanks for all the data. I didn't know that off the back of my hand, so I'm glad you went through that. But the other point I wanted to just echo is the concept of not wanting to leave talent on the table. And that's an argument that's persuasive to some folks. And it's also, when you think about how Enactus works with students and through students, the through part reaches so many more. And from what I know so far, a lot of the projects do support students who are, do support communities that are underrepresented. And so that's just kind of another aspect of the impact. And not leaving talent on the table, or not, innovative practices that bring out voices that you wouldn't otherwise hear and empower people that wouldn't otherwise be empowered. I think that's kind of core to everything we do. So I thought that one argument of not leaving talent on the table is kind of most aligned with kind of the approach here, although really all of them were, but that one spoke to me most.
Jerry?
Just a point of clarification before my question. I was the one that posted about Simon Sinek and the 17%, and I probably typed faster than I was thinking, but I didn't mean that in reference to the minority representation at Enactus. I meant that in reference to there are 4,000 two-year and four-year academic institutions in the United States, and there's only, when I started with Enactus, there were 400 teams, and now there's about 200 teams. And we see, this quite frankly, we see growth is a major #1 initiative, and Robin has mentioned that, and Zia is going to have that challenge when she comes on board. But it's not with regards to minority representation; it's with regard to be sustainable. We need to increase the number of teams that we have. But my question was, what we've been facing in New Jersey and the country in the last, I say the 21st century, is what I call a perfect storm of mental health, homelessness, incarceration, and addiction. And that perfect storm has only gotten worse, significantly worse during COVID. Those of you that are on top of the situation, there was over 100,000 deaths of drug overdose deaths in 2021, and we're projected to head down that path again in 2022. And more significant to me is a 51% increase in suicide attempts by young girls. And all of this is influenced by what's happened during COVID. At this point in time, when I talked to my students about this 10 years ago, it was a revelation. Now everybody knows somebody, and it's a countrywide problem. What can everyone sees the problem. What can Enactus do to help address this critical issue?
Well, go ahead, Kelvin.
No, please.
Go ahead. No. You go. You're on our panel. I was just going to attempt, but I'd love for you to take this.
Well, I'm gonna, Jerry, I'm gonna work around the edges of it and see where it goes, and then Betsy, please feel free to jump in. I think this gets back to this whole idea of coalition building, to be honest with you, and there's a role for corporate America to play in the space. And many of the companies, Jerry, like Walmart, we created these shared value networks, and we have identified 4 areas where we want to work, and they are education, finance, healthcare, and criminal justice. And I'm involved in the criminal justice SVN. So having said that, so Walmart's identified those 4, the right thing to do then is to look for other organizations who want to partner with us to affect change in those areas, systemic change. So then there's an opportunity for Enactus to work with us where we overlap, right? Where we intersect. And that's the only way, as Kim mentioned earlier, that's the only way I think that this thing takes root is we get these broad coalitions where we have common interests, we come together and we push for either public policy changes, or we partner with nonprofits who are in that space trying to make a difference. So Betsy, I don't know if you had anything to add. There's more I can say, but I want to give.
No. I think you hit the nail on the head. And I would say, to Zvia's point, for those of you who know Enactus so well, our students are very diverse, choose the projects they want to work on and choose the SDGs they want to address. And through that, they have this tremendous impact on others. One of the projects that we have in the US that's focused on diverse, underrepresented youth and employability is and engages a number of our diverse serving institutions. That's all about lifting up youth that don't have connections, that don't have opportunities, that may not be in university. And a lot of people consider university students to be privileged, and it is a privilege to be in higher education. But most of our students in the US and most globally are from an underrepresented group, whether they're women, socioeconomically diverse, racially or ethnically diverse. And so through them, they channel those ideas. And that, I think, is so much of the power of Enactus, is addressing the things that they see and they've experienced. And so I love what you said about the coalition building, because Enactus brings together, academia, youth, business, and an NGO like Enactus that's working around the world. So I think, to your point, to me, that's the power of Enactus, that ecosystem of people thinking and trying to do good and make the world a better place. We could all sing the Coke song.
SDG number 17 is partnerships to achieve the goals. So we're in keeping with the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah. Jared, I think your question is very fascinating. And, when we look at the last 20 years, all of those categories you expressed have increased significantly, right? And I think that, and this is just my thoughts, Kelvin, I think, the phones, iPhones, and all our phones have really driven a lot of isolation, right? And obviously we know that as humans, we need to be in groups. And I think educating us on how to ensure that we have the right connections and that we're part of a bigger group helps us to understand more our purpose in life. And as you think about just mental health, I think for us, we talk a lot about in our lives about our physical and making sure we're taking care of our physical well-being, but it's kind of taboo to really talk about our mental well-being. And I have to share with you, we had an hour and a half long discussion with many leaders in our company yesterday about how we can do better about talking about our mental well-being, no matter if we're in crisis mode, we're struggling, surviving, thriving, or excelling. And I think for us, as we think about educating our up and coming leaders on how to ensure that they're mentally thriving, it's very important that we address that. But I think that isolation piece has really been the tether to all of those categories or criteria that you mentioned. And I think we got to get back to gathering and being part of a group, right? Be it a support group or whoever our board of directors are in our own personal lives. That's very important. But some of those statistics are just incredible when you start talking about 110,000 deaths when it comes to drugs yearly. That's a lot of people, and we can't afford to lose that many people in society, in our country. And Jerry, that doesn't help our companies also, right? Because we need those individuals to be healthy, and we want to gainfully employ those individuals so that we can get after some of that demise that you spoke to. So this is something, Jerry, I think about often. We have to be better, right, in our country when it comes to those areas.
Kim, maybe as the last question, I see a question in the chat. How can organizations best empower their next gen talent to galvanize DEIB initiatives and take them to the next level? Wins, misses, you can share. And maybe that'll be our last question for today.
Yeah, I can take it real quick and love to get Rob and Calvin's view. I mean, we've got to, we have to provide the platform and the voice, right? Because quite frankly, in a lot of cases when it relates to DEI and the B as well, is the next gen leaders are further along than many others in senior leadership, right? So the more that we can actively engage them, the more that we can pull them along to help educate, right? To help just, inspire, quite frankly, the senior leaders, I think the better off we'll be. We use our BRGs, our ERGs, we actually call them inclusion networks, and we make sure that they have a seat at the table, they have a voice, that they are strategic partners, and not just kind of planning, events, but we are going to them with real business problems to solve. And quite frankly, a lot of those fall into the DE&I space. So yeah, engage them early and often is kind of our mantra.
Yeah,
Calvin and Rob.
Just real quickly, given the time, what I was going to say was put them in leadership roles in this space, because to your point, they are better equipped to handle some of this than we are. They can lead us to where we need to be, is the way I like to think about it. So just sort of co-signing what you said. So yeah, that's where my head's at.
Yeah, absolutely, Kelvin. And to your point earlier, we talked about being intentional, and that's what you're mentioning here, putting them in leadership positions and making sure they know the path, right? That there's a path for them, there's opportunities, and that will ensure that we keep them moving also within the organization, to give them breath and allow them to touch the organization in many different areas.
Oh, Betsy, you're on. Yeah,
yep.
There you go.
The universal language we now know, you're on mute. Thank you all, to Kim, to Kelvin, to Rob. Thank you so much for joining us for this fascinating conversation. Just as we did 18 months ago, I could sit and listen to this conversation for hours. So I'm so grateful. And on behalf of Enactus, we're so grateful for your time to share your insights and to offer this really inspirational path forward for the Enactus students and other university and young people as far as their leadership in this important area. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise with all of us. I want to just again thank Rich Products, and I'm gonna, Rich Products and our friends at Regis for sponsoring this session. I will just show this really briefly. These are demographics about Enactus US, and you can see kind of the diversity. And then this is diversity among the whole Enactus ecosystem across 30+ countries. So quite a diverse group. And last, I'll just highlight that in November, about a month from now, we do these on the 3rd Wednesday. We will have focus in this session on customer retention, and we will have Walgreens' Brad Ulrich and IRI's Sally Wyatt Lyons, and we invite you to join us then. And for now, I will say thank you for joining, and thank you for being part of Enactus, and have a great rest of your day.
Well, thank you, Betsy. Thanks for including me. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.